Foru bejojoa yeji komile. Mila nouejika 3 jours. 3 jours ane pa mila ba continuer que kaka ebe démission et la joke gba mila jole. Moi dit.
Il faut laisser elle doit venir, il va faire pour lui aussi ma foi non, c'est quoi? C'est forcé, ça c'est pas une question de chrétien ou bien je sais pas. Tu as fait pour toi, il faut laisser quitter. Un autre va venir, il va faire pour lui aussi.
Fort, s'il te plaît, libérez le Togo. Le pays, c'est pas pour toi. C'est pas pour famille Nyansingbe. Laissez le pays. Nous les citoyens, on va diriger le pays.
My people, Togo is on fire. For days now, protesters, many of them young, unemployed, just fed up, have flooded the streets of Lomé, risking everything to demand change, to demand a government that respects their voice, a leader who doesn't rule like a king, and a future that isn't locked behind barbed wire and police shields. And how does the government respond? With violence, with repression, with fear. According to human rights groups, security forces have been going door to door, arresting people without warrants, beating civilians with batons and ropes, looting homes, even destroying private property. And it's not just the brutality, it's bloodshed. The Associated Press confirms at least 7 deaths since the protests erupted, including 2 teenagers whose bodies were found floating in a lagoon. This isn't a protest over rising fuel prices. It isn't even just about one man. This is about a people saying, you will not crown yourself king over our silence. Because that's exactly what's happening. Togo's president, Faure Gnassingbé, didn't just rewrite the constitution. He created a new position for himself, with no elections, no term limits, and no accountability. A backdoor to power for life, after already holding onto it for 20 years. And let's not forget, he inherited that power from his father, who ruled Togo for nearly 4 decades. One family, nearly 60 years in power. And we're still calling this a democracy? Make it make sense. And the worst part of all of this is the silence. The inaction of regional bodies like ECOWAS and the African Union, institutions that were created to uphold peace, stability, and constitutional order on this continent. But when that order is violated, when leaders trample their constitutions and cling to power, they look the other way, or worse, they legitimize it. Today on The Breakdown, we're pulling back the curtain on what's really happening in Togo, why this moment matters far beyond its borders, and how the quiet return of authoritarianism across West Africa might be the biggest threat to the continent's future that no one is talking about. We're going to break it down, but first, a big welcome to all our new subscribers and members. I'm so glad you're here, and if you're watching and haven't joined us yet, please consider this your personal invitation, because here at Pan Genius TV, no, we're not just building a channel, we're building a home for global Black stories that are told with truth, with intention, and with care. And if that speaks to you, then hit subscribe and tap the bell for alerts. Also consider joining our membership community or dropping a super thanks to support our channel and help us remain independent. All right, now let's get into it.
One by one, a revolution is taking place in all of Africa, and we are proud to say we contributed to it. The people of Togo have had enough of the Gnassingbé family, who have ruled them since 1967, from father to son. Today is the 3rd day of burning and roadblocks in protest of the resignation of Faure Gnassingbé, president of Togo. This president was handed over power by his late father in 2005, and for 20 years he has stayed on as a president. Then last year, he introduced a constitutional reform that took the power from the people in choosing who becomes the next president into the hands of parliamentarians. And in May of this year, Togo's parliament approved the constitutional reform, ladies and gentlemen. So now they've abolished the direct presidential elections and transferred that authority to what they term as Council of Ministers, who will elect a president with no term limit. ladies and gentlemen, meaning that foreign Nasingbe will continue as president for as long as his political party holds majority seats in parliament. And his political party, ladies and gentlemen, the Union for the Republic, currently holds 108 out of 113 seats in Togo's National Assembly, which only leaves behind 5 seats for 4 opposition parties. This is what has triggered the uprising.
So to understand how Togo got here, we have to rewind the clock, not just 20 years, but all the way back to independence. Togo gained independence from France in 1960. And for a brief moment, it looked like a true African democracy was being born. The country's first president, Sylvanus Olympio, was an economist, Pan-Africanist, and a visionary. He wanted Togo to chart its own course, one that was independent from both colonial France and Cold War power plays. But that dream was short-lived. In 1963, just 3 years after independence, Olympio was assassinated in Africa's first post-independence military coup. That's right. And guess who helped lead that coup? A young ex-French soldier named Gnassingbé Eyadema. He would return just 4 years later to seize power for himself and hold on to it for the next 38 years. Under Eyadema, Togo became a classic African dictatorship, a one-party state, no free press, widespread human rights abuses, elections in name only. And when he died in 2005, instead of a peaceful transition of power, the military bypassed the constitution and handed control straight to his son, Faure Gnassingbé. It was a political inheritance. And Faure didn't waste time continuing the family tradition. Now, when the international community pushed back, Faure temporarily stepped down, only to run in a rushed election 2 months later, an election marred by violence, intimidation, and allegations of fraud. That was the beginning. Since then, Faure has ruled Togo for 2 straight decades. And how did he hold on to power? By changing the rules over and over again. In 2019, he amended the Constitution to reset the clock on his term limits, allowing him to run again in 2020. And now in 2025, he's gone even further.
In May, Gnassingbé took the powerful new role of President of the Council of Ministers, which has no fixed term limits. Civil society groups described the move as another indication of democratic backsliding in West Africa.
Rather than risk another controversial presidential race, Faure and his party rewrote the Constitution again, this time to scrap direct presidential elections entirely and create a new role, President of the Council of Ministers. What's that, you ask? Well, think of it as a prime minister with supreme power, unelected, unaccountable, and immune to term limits. And guess who's been sworn in as the first and only holder of that office? Faure Gnassingbé. No vote, no public debate, just political theater dressed up as reform. It's a move that even the country's own Catholic bishops are calling unbearable. And they're right. Because Togo isn't a failed democracy. It's a dynastic dictatorship in disguise. And the tragedy is they've gotten away with it for nearly 60 years.
Several people were killed during anti-government demonstrations in Togo last week, said human rights activists who also accused security forces of using, quote, shocking violence against protesters. The protest began last Thursday as people took to the streets to call for the resignation of longtime leader Faure Gnassingbé amid what government critics called a cost of living crisis. A joint statement by 12 Togolese civil society and human rights groups accused security forces of carrying out arbitrary arrests, beating civilians with batons and ropes, and of stealing and destroying private property. The statement said 3 bodies, including 2 minors, were found in a lagoon east of Lomé, and 2 more in a lake in one of the capital's districts on Friday. Another 2 bodies were found in another Lomé district on Saturday. A government statement dated Sunday acknowledged bodies were recovered from the lagoon and the lake, but said the deaths were due to drowning. The protests are a part of ongoing political turmoil in Togo.
Now, this isn't just about a power grab. It's about everything that power has denied the people of Togo for decades. Because what's unfolding in the streets of Lomé right now isn't just political, it's deeply personal. The majority of the people protesting are young. They've never known another leader, never seen a peaceful transfer of power, never been allowed to dream of a future that wasn't controlled by one name, Nyasingbe. However, there's supposed to be a democracy. So the people, they're tired of waking up every morning to the same broken system, tired of watching their parents struggle, their friends disappear, and their voices just silenced. They're tired of pretending that this is a democracy when protest is banned, the press is censored, and elections are rigged. Let's be clear about what they're facing. Since 2022, peaceful protests have been banned in Togo. And just last month, the government suspended RFI and France 24, 2 of the only international media outlets reporting independently on the situation. And now, during these protests, security forces have been storming homes, arresting people without cause, beating civilians, and looting private property, according to reports. This isn't law enforcement. It's political terror. At least 7 people have died, 2 of them teenagers. These are not isolated incidents. This is a pattern of abuse, one that has gone unchecked for many years. And yet, even in the face of all of this, the people are rising. They are risking their lives, not just to change a constitution, but to reclaim their dignity. To say, we will not be ruled by fear any longer. Because this generation isn't just protesting a president, right? They are rejecting a regime. They're rewriting the story of their country with their feet, their voices, and yes, now their blood. Now, on paper, Togo's economy seems to be ticking upward. GDP growth has stayed robust at around 5.3 to 5.5% per year, with forecast of 5.2 to 6% through 2025 and 2026. And this is driven by agriculture, services, and booming private consumption. Inflation is under control, hovering around 2 to 2.7%, and has even dipped to around 1% in early 2025. So then, why are people in the streets? Because rising numbers don't always translate to rising living standards. Here's the reality behind the growth. Youth unemployment is painfully high, estimated near 34%. Poverty remains endemic. Nearly 1 in 5 Togolese live on less than $1.90 a day. Structural problems persist. Political instability, patronage, corruption, and weak public services are holding back real progress. The government has rolled out economic reforms, boosting port projects, encouraging private investment, and trimming inflation. But the benefits, they've been uneven. Young people, especially graduates, struggle to find jobs that match their expectations. Small business owners face red tape and graft on a daily basis. Rural communities still contend with food insecurity despite steady harvests. So yes, the economy is growing, but for millions, the daily grind just never budges. That's the truth fueling anger in the streets. When you've seen headlines that say economic boom for years, but you still can't feed your family, send your kids to school, or breathe without fear, you start to ask, who really is this growth for? Who? Now, Togo is not the exception. It is the pattern. Across the continent, democracy is on life support. Let's go down the list. Guinea. In 2020, President Alpha Condé rewrote the constitution to give himself a 3rd term. And less than a year later, he was overthrown in a coup. Côte d'Ivoire. Alassane Ouattara said he wouldn't run again. Then he changed the rules and ran for a third time anyway, and is planning to run again, according to sources. Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, 3 countries, 3 coups, all within 2 years. They want to save their country from corrupt leadership. And it's not just West Africa, it's East Africa too. Right now, Kenya is on edge. Hundreds of thousands of young Kenyans have taken to the streets, angry about skyrocketing living costs, unemployment, and a government pushing a punishing tax bill in the middle of a cost of living crisis. Just like Togo, these protests aren't just about one policy. They're about trust. They're about a generation that's tired of being ignored. And in both countries, the response has been eerily similar. Police violence, arrests, silencing dissent. And here's the truth, the hard truth. Whether it's Togo, Kenya, Congo, or Cote d'Ivoire, the methods may differ, but the message from many African governments is the same. We will do what we want, and you will just stay quiet. But people aren't staying quiet anymore. They are tired of being silent. Because this generation, the TikTok generation, the WhatsApp generation, is done waiting for permission. They're done watching presidents stay in power for decades while telling them to be patient. They're done watching constitutions get twisted like Play-Doh in the hands of men who fear elections more than war. And the worst part about all of this is the silence of our regional bodies. ECOWAS, the African Union, nothing. Absolutely nothing. In fact, you could argue that they're not just failing to stop this behavior, they are enabling it. Let's talk about Togo. How does a sitting president of a so-called democratic country who's been in power for 20 years remain untouched by ECOWAS? How does that happen in a bloc that claims to uphold the protocol on democracy and good governance? One that explicitly rejects any unconstitutional change of power. And yet, Faure Gnassingbé has rewritten the Constitution multiple times to stay in office. And what does ECOWAS do? They promote him. He was appointed ECOWAS chairman from 2017 to 2018, and then as mediator in the Rwanda DRC conflict. Yeah, you heard that right. A man who refuses to step down in his own country is now mediating peace between 2 others. Not punished, not sanctioned, rewarded. No wonder we don't take each other seriously on this continent. No wonder we have to fly to Washington, sit at the feet of Trump, and beg for peace deals. And it's not just ECOWAS. The African Union has a whole charter on democracy, elections, and governance. It looks great on paper, but on the ground, presidents still do what they want to do. Break term limits, kill protest, muzzle the press, and the AU says nothing, does nothing. No pressure, no accountability, no consequences. So when the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, decided to leave ECOWAS, can you really blame them? They looked around and saw hypocrisy, a system that protects power, not the people. And that's the tragedy of it all. We keep saying African solutions to African problems, but when the problem is African leadership, who's brave enough to fix it? So what now? What really needs to happen in Togo to stop this moment from spiraling into something worse? First of all, any solution must begin with listening to the Togolese people. Not just the opposition, not just diplomats, the people. There must be space for open dialogue, for truth-telling, for healing. That means transitional justice, civil society-led consultations, and a seat at the table for those who've paid the highest price for freedom, the youth, the women, the movement builders. Because democracy isn't about politicians negotiating power, it's about people reclaiming it. Secondly, let's talk about ECOWAS and the African Union. They must evolve or just dissolve. Because right now, ECOWAS has the credibility of a referee who only blows the whistle when it's convenient. They sanction military coups, but stay silent when presidents rig the game with constitutional tricks. A real ECOWAS must draw a red line on authoritarianism, military or civilian. And if they can't, then maybe it's time we build something new, something accountable, something people-centered. And the African Union, it must start acting like a union of peoples rather than a club of presidents. It must empower independent bodies to investigate abuses, convene emergency summits when democracy is under threat, and suspend regimes that rise through fraud, not just force. Because Africa can no longer afford to protect leaders at the expense of citizens. No. Thirdly, we need a continental youth coalition. Africa is the youngest continent on earth. Yet, it's still being led by men who came of age before most of us were born. Where's the Pan-African youth voice in all of this? It's time to build a new force, a cross-border, intergenerational coalition of young leaders, activists, creators, and builders. One that refuses to accept dynastic power, rigged systems, or silence as the price of survival. Because if we don't rise now in Togo, what's happening there today will happen elsewhere tomorrow. So where do we go from here, my people? Well, we go forward, but not blindly. We go together, but not quietly. We go with a clear vision, an Africa that works for the people, not just the powerful. Because Togo is not just a warning, it's a wake-up call. And the question now is not just what will happen next, but what are we going to do about it? Now I turn it over to you, my people. What do you think it will take for African institutions like ECOWAS and the African Union to truly serve the people, not the politicians? And if they won't change, should we start building something new from the ground up? What does that look like? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's have this conversation together. And if you are enjoying this show, then be sure to share this episode and don't forget to subscribe for more. That's it for today's show. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Sandra Babu-Boateng. Until next time, take care. Hey you! Thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. Also, visit face2faceafrica.com for your daily news and updates on what's going on within the global Black community so you can stay informed.